Hello patrons, and welcome back to our September tutorial. I'm feeling better today. Thank you guys for understanding and for giving me yesterday night off. It just wasn't happening. I wasn't creating good artwork and I didn't feel good or connected with the piece that I was working on, which I'll show you in just a few moments. Today I'm feeling better. I'm excited to get working on this. If you don't want to hear the intro of how we got to this piece, you can go ahead and skip forward maybe 5 or 10 minutes, I'm not sure, and we'll see ya on the painting side of the tutorial. But for the rest of you, I want to do a little bit of intro, and especially for Jess, who I have an apology for. Jess asked for a colorful tutorial this month, and in my head I was like, yeah, sure, that's great, I'll go ahead and do that. And so I picked out the lion, and then I was like, okay, well, we'll try and do the colorful splashing that Jess was referencing from like my red panda days and that kind of thing. And I got to working, and it ended up turning into this on the first layer. It's not like the worst thing I've ever created, but I don't like it. It's too busy, even though it's not finished, and I do deserve to finish it, so I will finish it at some point just to see how it turns out. But I wasn't connected to the color palette, it wasn't feeling like me, and I didn't want to keep going with it. Twofold, the other reason I felt awkward about releasing that tutorial to you is that this type of color palette, the splash pattern where you're having to use your creative side of your brain more, it's not conducive to doing a tutorial, because I don't come in with like a color plan. I have my color palette, and then I move around the page, and I need like those brain cells that are in that creative process to be focusing on the painting rather than on explaining what I'm doing. So it's really, really difficult for me to keep that looseness in the flow while also still explaining what I'm doing. So it's kind of multiple questions that kind of stem out of that. One, would you like to see a tutorial where that is the case, where I'm not really explaining what I'm doing, but you could watch in real time how my process would go? I haven't done a piece like this for a long time. My red panda was done before I even had a YouTube channel. And it was just a different creative space that I was in, because I wasn't recording all the time, and recording does take a lot of extra energy and spoons and brain power and educational things and that kind of thing. So one is, do you want to see a tutorial like that, or you prefer I stay to subjects that I can actually explain to you? It would only be one tutorial, the one that Jess asked for, and we can kind of go from there. And two, would you like me to use the footage I already have, which is similar to that? Like, I'm not explaining a whole lot, I'm just going through. I started this piece, I can finish it and stitch that footage together and still give that to you in October if you would like. If you want to see that, if you want to see me go through kind of like the struggles of, does this piece work, does it not work, I'm not feeling it, do we keep going, I can share that with you if you want to see that side of the process, but it's not going to be a polished tutorial if I do. No worries if you don't want to see it. I'm clearly not showing that to you today because I didn't feel like it was ready or like worthy of your time. So let me know. Always open feedback. And what I am excited for is working on this piece, because the whole time I was painting that other one with the colors, as much as I love colors and everything, this piece in particular, I was like, man, I want my natural colors. Man, I want my Daniel Smith browns. And this is the piece I wanted to do. So I'm really excited to work on this one today. I think it'll go well. Crossing our fingers. One other tiny note, not important, but my hands are super beat up from gardening yesterday. So apologize that they're not as pretty as usual. But yeah, I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. Oh, that didn't take as long as I thought. That's good. So I went ahead and sketched out my lion again, and I pulled a color palette. I think I've explained this before, but in case I haven't, I go through my Daniel Smith palette whenever I'm using these colors. I have the big one, and then I go ahead and pull out the specific colors that I'm going to use and put them in a smaller palette. That both helps my shoulder, so I'm not reaching across a big palette, and it's also easier for you guys to follow along because there's not like 80 colors sitting in front of you. My color palette for today is yellow ochre, red burgundy ochre, burnt umber, raw umber violet, bloodstone genuine, which is a granulating Primatech color that is kind of like a soft black, leaning more towards the brown side. Then I have a Payne's gray if we need it to darken up the bloodstone. I don't know if we will, but it's there. And then I also pulled my Chromium green, which was a sample given to me by one of our viewers, and I wanted to use that for the eye color specifically. So that is the palette that we're going to be using. I feel much stronger about this one. I'll be able to explain my process better. And oh, you guys probably want to see the reference photo, right? This is a photo I took many years ago at the Sacramento Zoo, so I'll have a link in the description below that you can go ahead and use. We're just going to be using like the portrait-y portion of the picture, and I think we're ready to get started. I'm most likely going to be using just the Silver Black Velvet size 8 round, but I also have my Escoda Perla if I need something that's a little stiffer, and I will be using the Escoda Perla size 2 for our details later. Put those off to the side. We'll move our little color swatch elsewhere, and we're going to start with our lightest color, which is yellow ochre. Happy October, since it is technically October 1st instead of September 30th when I'm making this tutorial, despite it being a September reward. It's my favorite month of the year. My birthday's in October. It's fall. It's marginally changing leaves here in California, but fall colors in other places. I always like to start in some of our darker areas first. We're going to be going through and doing our little value map, so just putting in some light washes to let us know where we're going. Looking at the reference photo. My sketch only includes like the most prominent details, so eye placement, ear placement, the nose, and where like the cheeks are. Something I want to do differently in this piece from the piece that I did first is I want this one to kind of fade off to my typical white. I kept wanting the mane to like flow off and fade, and I had decided I wanted to edge to edge for some reason in the other one, and then I don't know, it's just not my style. You guys know my style by now. I think I want to go ahead and drop in some of our darker color, at least the red burgundy ochre, into this area right above the face in this first wash rather than waiting for the second one. I might bounce around between these two colors. I want occasional like fur marks going out, but then have some of them soften off to the white of the paper. I don't think there's a way for me to avoid running into the top of the paper here. My sketch was a little bit high, I guess. We might be too dry on the other side here. Oh, no, we're okay. Put in a couple little furry marks. I should have a paper towel on hand, just in case. Oh, I'm already loving this so much more. I think I'm going to go ahead and paint over this whole ear, and then we'll paint in the darker values later. Do some negative painting. I think this edge has dried by now. At least started to dry, so we're going to have to add some extra pigment there. And try not to add too much water so that I don't bloom back into the face. Got a cat hair, as always. Putting down the wet paint first and then softening off those edges. We're going to go ahead and lay down a fairly large wash of this really pale yellow ochre. If you haven't seen I did a collaboration with Sade a while ago, and I did one of my color spotlight episodes on her channel, so it's still on my playlist, but if you have never looked at that playlist, if you've only gone off of what videos are new on my channel, you wouldn't have seen it. And I kind of explain how to use the color. I know some people really don't like it, and for that my reply is to try Daniel Smith's version. Not because I'm a fangirl or anything, but it's truly more transparent than I think any other version that I've used, while still retaining the yellow ochre quality. I know like Schminke has a new transparent ochre that's out, but it doesn't feel the same level of earthiness, I guess. That's how I would put that. We're going to go in with the tip of the brush here and negative paint some hairs on the chin. And then just go through and soften a couple of these edges so that it doesn't look so harsh. I know my mom and my stepdad will be excited for this piece. They are big cat lovers, both of big cats and the amount of their love for them, especially lions. Doing these kind of strokes in the wet washes will allow you to, well, first I should say they're wet washes, but it's not like there's a puddle of water on the page. It's that there is like just a sheen. I'm going to rotate this here. There's a sheen to it so that it's wet enough that the paint will flow out from where you put it down, but not so that it's going to completely lose all form, and that'll help convincingly lay down some of those watercolor washes that suggest fur, but that you're not painting every strand of hair. Alright. I'll lay down this soft wash again. So here you can really see that the paper's wet but not puddling. And we can put in these soft details. This is not something that would really work very well with something like Core. Core's paints flow all over the place, so you might have to be really careful or make sure the paper is just barely damp to do that. But with most other brands, I think you should be okay. You also want to make sure there's not too much water on your brush, because that will create more puddles as well. Every time you put a stroke down, you're going to get more of a deposit on the end of the stroke. So just keep that in mind while you're working. We're using fairly liftable colors today, so if we have a mistake, we can go in and try and pick it up. I'm a little worried about going into the main part of the face without having dried this. So I think we'll take a break after I fill in this ear that I forgot about. We'll hit it with the heat tool, and then we can keep going. Alright, we're going in with a light mixture of that yellow ochre with water. I'm going to go ahead and deposit the pigment. Let me zoom in on my picture. Kind of along the sides here. And it's lighter in the center. We can fade that off. I'm leaving a little patch that's lighter here next to the eye. There are all these little hairs everywhere. Like lint or something. I'm going to try and not fuss too much with my edges. Keeping in mind what we did in the elephant tutorial and how well that worked out, just to have it be nice and loose. Have some hard edges mixed in with your soft edges. We're going to leave a pretty large gap under the eye, which is also lighter. And I'm just going to gently pick up some pigment along the edge of the face. It gets a little bit lighter before going into the mane. We'll of course do more glazes there later, but for now we can leave that alone, I think. Painting that darker area first, and then we're softening off all our edges. I didn't mention this on the other side, but there's a fair amount of white towards the bottom there, or at least a very light cream. Steve Mitchell on the Mind of Watercolor just did a video on hard and soft edges if you want some more information about that. But I feel like the key for my style of watercolor anyway is to have a mixture of the hard and the soft. If there's too many hard lines, it can look over detailed in some places while not detailed in others, unless you're committing to the entire piece being hyper realistic. And if it's too soft everywhere, you're going to lack definition and it'll turn into more of an abstract painting. I shouldn't have messed with this wash here. It's going to create a back run. So I'm just going to dab up what's wet and we can go in and fix it with another layer later. Our forehead is a little bit darker here at the top, but it's kind of a more muted tone. I'm going to take some of the raw umber violet and just mix a tiny bit in to our other two colors we've been using. And just kind of softly glaze this over the top. This line has a very hairy little chin. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of color. There's some grayish brown textures in here. I'm using that same watered down mixture as I did on the forehead. I'm going to try and keep my brush in the direction that the fur would be going. This area here is going to be really dark. And then I'm also going to put in some of our darker main color. This is where things get a little scary. Take my raw umber violet. And a little bit of the burnt umber. Keeping them separate on the palette as much as I can. I'm going to take this burnt umber, and we're going to start higher up. Again, pulling my brush in this downward motion, using the tip of the brush. You're really going to want a brush with a fine tip for this type of technique, anything with long fur. Cricket, why are we grooming again while we're filming? You cannot tell me that you can't go like 2 hours without grooming yourself. It's very silly. Alright, and then we're going to take our raw umber violet as we move further down here. The raw umber violet does like to flow more than the other pigments do because it has, or I assume it's because it has a PV19 in it, so it's not just an earth tone. If you don't have raw umber violet, sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier. If you don't have raw umber violet, you can mix raw umber with any quinacridone, preferably like a rose that leans more towards violet or a quinacridone magenta. It's a warmer version of an earth tone, but different from that burnt umber we talked about being a little bit more on the yellow side. Getting some more concentrated pigment. Dropping that into the washes we already have. I accidentally lifted some of the pigment here right over the top, so I'm just putting some of that back in. Just trying to balance that U shape on the underside here. I think that's pretty good for the first wash. We can reinforce it on the second one. I'm also going to take some of this raw umber violet. We're going to move up to the top of the painting. Go ahead and add some up here. This is the red burgundy ochre. Turn the board so that you can reach the direction that you need to for doing your fur in the proper direction. And I'm trying to find a balance in these little wispy hairs up here between providing definition by having like these few pieces that you can really tell what they are, with having them not stick out against the rest of the painting. I also think it's funny that all these animals in September turned out to be African animals. It was not intentional, it's just how it happened, but I'm not complaining. I want to move further down on the painting, but I'm going to put my hand in this area. I know it, so I'm going to go ahead and try that real quick. Laying down the color approximately where I want it, and then once again going in with the wet brush, damp brush I guess, and softening those edges. I just put a bunch of pigment on my brush, so I'm going to go ahead and use the Escoda just to soften this off so I don't have to waste that pigment. I have some kind of pigment in here though. Lovely. I'm touching the silver black velvet brush to like everything unintentionally. We are turning again. Since I'm right-handed, I need this board to be at an angle where I can do the fur in the proper direction. You can actually hear the difference in texture between these two brushes, and that you can barely hear the silver black velvet when the Escoda goes down. Hopefully the camera's picking that up. It's very soft, but you can tell you're listening for it. I never want to put too much pressure on the brush I'm softening off with because I don't want to scrub the layers underneath. As I mentioned, these are very liftable colors. So if I'm too rough, then it's just going to pick everything up. I feel like we're a little bit disjointed between the color up here and the color down here, so I'm going to go ahead and glaze in some of this red burgundy ochre in between. It's more based on an artistic decision than on the reference photo. I think you could have gotten away with not using any burnt umber. We only used it for those two patches there, so I think you can do without that one. And then while that's still wet, I'm also going to go ahead and reinforce some of these darker tones so we get hard edges and soft edges. Put down too much water here. I just wanted to kind of cover that super stark white. Alright, so if you can see the difference between this side and this side, this is two abrupt colors and this is blended together a bit more. So once again, I'm going to check to make sure I'm starting at about the same point. I think one of the things I was struggling with in the first piece is that it took me years to do big cats properly, because they're so symmetrical. And like really honing in on those skills so that they're convincing. And I'm probably not strong enough in my depiction of them yet to then know how to break those rules of symmetry in terms of the color, because I didn't want the color splashes to be symmetrical. I wanted the color balance to be symmetrical, like balanced. But I didn't want the same colors to be repeated, so like I didn't want purple, purple, teal, teal. I feel like that's what happened when I did the sloth tutorial a while back. And it was fine, it's cute painting and I really like it, but it's really just like a regular painting, but that has different colors, versus the splashes that I think Jess was asking for would be more like this asymmetrical thing. I'm going to put that brush down before I accidentally whap it into the paper. And then coming back to this one, I'm able to words, Denise. I'm able to use the same colors and make that work a little bit better so that we recognize it as like this nice, powerful, strong lion. So again, I can either finish that one just to show you how I work with a painting I'm not happy with, if that's a tutorial you're interested in, or I can just start over with a new animal. I wanted to do a giraffe. We've done a regular giraffe here, so I thought the comparison would be nice. But I didn't want it to be too similar to, I know Lindsay, the Frugal Crafter, came out with a rainbow giraffe recently, so I didn't want it to be too samey. These aren't the same. I'm trying to decide which side I like better. This is much stronger, and there's like 3 tones. I think I like the other side better, where it's a little bit softer. But I don't know that I can really do much because this is almost dry. I might have to go in when it's dry and lift out a bit. This side is much more subtle, and I think I like that. So we're just going to go ahead and lift a little bit. It's not going to be quite as nice as the other side. Putting it down the right way the first time, but it'll help. All right. This is definitely further along than I was yesterday in terms of like the overall completion. This was, I think, more time. This was an extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so of recording time. And I still had to do contouring. I still had to go in with second layers. I still had to go in with all the details. Here, we're pretty much done with the background. And then we're going to be going in, well, not background, but like backdrop. And then we're going to be going in and defining the ears and facial features. So I just feel so much better in my wheelhouse with this one. And like I'm actually qualified to teach it. That's a hard thing that I think all content creators struggle with, is when they get asked for tutorials that is not something they do. I remember my very first poll when I first got Patreon. I'm going to be using my chromium green and yellow ochre to just create a really, really soft green for the eyes. My first question that I asked my patrons was which tutorial to do on YouTube, and it was like, I don't know, some different animals, and then pears or fruit, and then flowers. I'm not sure why I even gave flowers as an option, but that's what won. And one patron apparently was so unpleased with that decision that they left Patreon and cited that they didn't want to be on Patreon to see me paint things that I don't paint, if that makes sense. So they didn't want to see me paint flowers because that's not something I'm skilled in. They wanted to see me paint animals. So since then, I have stuck to what I know I can teach well. And it's not like I'm dying to paint flowers. I don't have any desire to paint flowers. So it's not like it's holding me back from trying new things. It's just I took that piece of advice and kind of stuck with it and took it as kind of liberty to make sure that I'm painting things that I feel comfortable with and that I know you guys will enjoy from me. So I thought that this color would be red enough for this nose. It's a red ochre. We might want to pull in another color and just do a really gentle glaze of a pink, because that's pretty brown, yeah? So just gonna open my palette here, and I'm gonna take a little bit of the rhodonite out. It's a Primatech color, so it's a really soft pink. And we'll mix that in. And that should give us a little bit more pinky color. You can use any softer pink that you've got. Just the tiniest touch of a PV19 would be fine. You will see something different from me this month. Well, I guess technically next month. I'm going to record it this month. You'll see it on November 2nd. I'm taking my annual BlizzCon trip. And I have a fan art piece that I'm crossing my fingers really hard that it turns out the way I want it to. I haven't done any of the work for it, but I just have the image in my head that I really want to do. It won't be a tutorial here on Patreon or anything, but you'll get to see a human out of me, which is scary and also exciting. All right, let's go ahead and focus on some contouring on this face here. I don't know, I feel like I need to have a little bit of this raw umber in here. It's not quite as red. We're gonna come in on the cheeks. There's actually kind of like a line that comes down. I think for the other side, I'm going to zoom you guys in so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. I guess I'll add, I've just been thinking about this while I've been painting. If you are ever unhappy with any of the quality of work that I come out, and to the point where like you want to leave Patreon for it, I mean, you're always welcome to leave. It's not an obligation, obviously, and I'm grateful for all of you guys being here, but I feel like a lot of people, the people that I've had that have left, I'll put it this way, and cited reasons other than financial reasons, have all said things along the lines of like, oh, I wasn't happy with my reward. I mean, there's very few of them, but I wasn't happy with my rewards, or I wish you hadn't have done this, or that kind of thing. But I don't know, like, these people are people who have never talked to me. They've never brought it forward to me. And I think the vast majority of you guys know that I am completely open to feedback, and I'm here for you guys. And if I'm doing something that you're not happy with, just ask me. And if it's something I can adjust, I will adjust it. Sorry. I think that's always the most frustrating for a content creator and people that I've talked to, is that when we get, if there's like a particular video that gets a lot of thumbs down, sometimes we know what it is. Like sometimes like, oh, okay, yeah, that's because of this. But a lot of times we don't know, like if you don't leave a comment or you don't message us, like we don't know why it's problematic, and then we can't grow or adjust from there. So again, you're not obligated to ever do that. It's not free reign to like control or try and like dictate what other people are putting on their channels. Like I see a lot of those comments on YouTube, which I'm sure none of you guys, but like, ugh, I can't believe you did it this way. Why don't you do it this other way, or whatever. But a lot of times we can explain what we were thinking and give you feedback, open up a dialogue. And I assume people who are leaving comments like that are wanting interaction, otherwise you wouldn't leave a comment. So if that is the case, let us know. I guess I can't speak for everyone. I can't speak for all content creators, obviously. I can only speak for myself. I just thank all of you guys for being here, for supporting what I do and being so understanding. Like last night when things were not going right. I know this video is better than the one I had started, so just in terms of content for you guys, I feel like it's more worth your time. As I'm sure you guys have figured out, I am behind schedule. My Skillshare class will be out as soon as I can get it out. To be quite honest though, I'm way further behind than I'd like to be. I got half, maybe more than half of the script written. Once I have the script written, it'll go a bit quicker. But the script tells me what I need to film, what shots I need to get. It preps me for all the audio I have to record. So I'm going to work on that later today. I did a little bit of gardening yesterday for the first time in way too long. I was thinking it has to have been over, I don't know, at least over 2 years since I've like purposefully gardened. I've done a little bit of maintenance since then. I have a patio balcony that used to be full of plants, and it was such a nice space to retreat to and to meditate on. But it has not been like that for quite some time. So I went to the plant nursery yesterday and picked up some lavender. I know it's a weird time of year to be planting a garden, but got some lavender and some salvia and a couple more succulents. And one of our friends from the channel, Grace, sent me a couple little plant babies. Mostly succulents. She also sent me an African violet, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of terrified of it. I'm afraid I'm gonna kill it and disappoint her. But I got some African violet soil. Hopefully has all like the nutrition that that finicky little plant needs. I haven't had an indoor houseplant for a long time, so that'll be interesting. African violets can't be grown outside. Have to be protected inside, especially headed into winter. I was telling Grace after I got her package that she might have instilled a little too much faith in my gardening skills, and that my thumb was more of a soft terre verte than a Kelly green for growing. Make sure you're sitting back, taking in your whole piece. That your overall values and textures are working for you. come up over the eyes. I don't have guidelines for these. So we are winging it. Oh, I forgot to mention earlier, I did say that you could replace this red burgundy ochre with a burnt sienna, but it's PR102, if you wanted to know the pigment number. And I'm actually really enjoying it, a bit more than I expected to. I had done my swatch card of it a while back, and I was like, oh, whatever, it's like a burnt sienna, why else would I use it? But it's got just like a hint of a different glow. It has a little bit of a black pigment particle that kind of separates out of it while it's drying. I didn't do this shape right. Let's try that again. Those are in the right spots. We really need to go for that symmetry that I was talking about earlier. Oh no, I'm so sorry. I told you I was going to zoom you in. I'm the worst. My apologies, guys. Have you up here nice close for the rest of it. I don't think there's too much other shadows we need up here. I'm mixing up a light raw umber. We're going to put in, actually, we're not going to do that yet. We need to start defining around the ears here. But I'm not quite ready to do where it meets the fur on the face. I think we need to do the outer ear first. We'll go ahead and put in a little shading here. The mane. Okay, we need our burnt umber mixed up. We need our red burgundy ochre ready to go. I'm going to start with the red burgundy ochre since it's kind of a middle tone. And it's going to come from the inside. We're going to round it out on the edge. And we're gonna taper this edge and mix in some of our burnt umber. Inside the ear, I'm going to use some of the yellow ochre. I'm going to go back to the red burgundy ochre. And then I'm going to take some of the raw umber violet and drop that on the outer rim of the ear. We also have some fur coming up behind the ear. And even though I want definition here, I don't want it to stick out because nothing else has that kind of definition, so we're softening off some edges. And now we can come back to the face and kind of put in that shadow. And this up here is also like little tufts of ear fluff. Little stretch break situation. We're going to repeat all that on the other side. Was I in frame for you guys in that last year? I'm sorry. You'll be able to see this one. Okay. All right, that was a long time of quiet. Sorry about that, guys. Another stretch break. Oh boy. All right, I'm gonna go into the eyes with some yellow ochre. And perhaps some of this raw umber violet along the top. Kind of fade that down into the, like under where the eyelid is. Let that dry. Move down to our little nose. I'm going to get a little bit more of that rhodonite. Mix it with our red burgundy ochre. I want to do all of my colored shading before I bring in the really dark tones that are going to outline the eyes and the nose. That way, if I had to do more glazing, I'm not going to smear the black lines into the color that we have. If we need to do a little bit of adjustment later, we can, but this will help the majority of that. There's a tiny bit more shading I want to do here on the underside of the upper lip area. I'm going to go ahead and use this little brush just to drop in a bit of color and then soften off that edge. There's slightly darker areas behind where the whiskers come out. We'll go over those with a darker color later, but the light tan color is also darker there. Doing a bit more shading around the eyes. I'm just trying to break up this really smooth texture with some additional shading, looking really closely at the lion's face. Looking at what we've already done on our painting. These whole patches over the eyes look really too light. So I'm just going to add in a little yellow ochre there, even though there's no particular shading I'm looking at while doing that. And we need to come under the chin here. I'm going to try and follow the line I have to the best of my ability, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Ah! There's some slightly darker but non-black shading right below the upper muzzle. And I think once that dries, we are ready for the black details. I should say darkest details. I'm going to start with the Bloodstone Genuine, which is that slightly brownish black shade. And I'm going to use this very sparingly. It is a liftable black, which is nice. A lot of blacks will stain. This one's nice and liftable. I should say lots of darks stain, like Payne's Gray or anything with a phthalo blue in it. The area above the head, the mane here, is not quite dark enough. I don't really want it to be the black, but we're gonna glaze another layer of that burnt umber, or sorry, the raw umber violet. Maybe with just a hint of the bloodstone, actually. Still using the bloodstone. I don't think we're going to have to go into the Payne's gray. I think this is going to be dark enough. I'm going to lay down that dark pigment. And then with just a damp brush, I'm going to kind of fade it off in some areas where there's a softer touch. I'm going to mix the bloodstone with the raw umber violet to connect this one with the bridge of the nose. Alright guys, I was trying to make it on one memory card, but we're gonna need some more time, so I'm actually going to take a little break. It's about 1 o'clock and I'm gonna go have lunch. That'll mean the video will be a little late to you guys, but that way at least I'm not rushing through it. And I will come back in a little bit and we'll finish and we'll be good to go. Alrighty friends, we are back. Of course, longer than I expected, but that's as always. I should just start expecting that my breaks will be a bit longer as I get pulled away, checking emails and things like that. But we're ready to finish up our little lion friend. Taking that Bloodstone Genuine again. Oops, I put it in the wrong spot on my palette. Covered up the brown area. I'm gonna turn this so I can get a better angle with my brush. Definitely thicker than I wanted, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pull up there. Go ahead and soften this inner edge. I can tell these aren't even, so I'm going to pull the board up. It's so hard for me to do eyes on camera. I feel like I always mess them up because the angles are not conducive to good artwork and symmetricality. Is that a word? Don't think so. I'm going to dry this and then I'm going to tilt it towards me and work on it so I can finish it up. All right. They're probably sloped more downward as compared to the reference photo. Those come out more horizontally, but I like how this eye turned out and I don't want to mess with the dried paint, so we're gonna match it. The right eye is a tad smaller than the left, and I think that's because we dropped this down. I'm gonna bring this up. We can try and push back this black just a hair. This Bloodstone Genuine is so good for that. Like, you can push it around the page. It's not locked in. And there aren't the same markings on this side as there are on that side, but just to make it look like I didn't forget them in the painting, we're going to go ahead and add a little bit. Just kind of extend those down and then sop up the water so that they don't dry too dark. Taking a look at the reference. All right, how about we give him some pupils? It's another nerve-wracking part of the painting process. If you see me rotating my brush, it's because there's these little hairs that bend downward, and that makes a difference with my strokes, so I'm turning it so that it's at whichever angle I need it to be. As usual, I like this side, but not this side. I think we're starting to lose a little bit of the color on the inside of the eye because of how much scrubbing I've been doing. It's gentle, but I'm still lifting pigment constantly. So I'm gonna let this dry. We'll put in the pupil, and then we'll probably also put in some color. try that one more time. Or 4 more times, who knows. Okay, that's better. Once I know they're in the right place, we can fill them in. I have the teeniest, tiniest bit of green on my brush. I'm still gonna water it down. Some of the red ochre burgundy on my brush. We're just going to drop that in around the pupil. Okay, I'm glad I didn't try and fit this all in before the break. 1, I was getting hungry. 2, we've now gone for another 13-14 minutes. And that's how much time I had left, and we still got a whole nose to do. I'm working with the same colors. Bloodstone Genuine. I'm going to take my damp brush and just wiggle it on this bottom edge. Only for the part that's up underneath the nostril. More brush wiggling here at the base. I'm going to kind of pull the pigment up in little, I don't know the right word for that, like fur spikes, I don't know. We've got some hairs that overlap this black area basically that are going to be lighter, that if they were being painted on with acrylic, we just paint it over the top of the black. Given that we're watercolor, we're going to do the negative painting to pull it into the fur. Ooh, don't lift, don't lift. These are not even in the photo, but I don't like how it looks in the picture. It's really uneven. I'm just adding some freckles for texture. They're not in the original reference. He's got 2 or 3 maybe. Little guy down here. Just making it a little extra spotty. And we can come on down. Well, the last little details always take the longest time. think I need to come down further, maybe with a slightly lighter wash. My phone is locking me out. There we go. And I'm going to mix together some of the Bloodstone with the burnt umber, or raw umber, sorry. You don't even need the burnt umber for this one. I barely used it, and I painted over what I did use. So I just have a dark brown. So put it on the paint first and then just gently try and tap it with a clean brush. And take a little bit of the raw umber violet and the burnt, what is it, red burgundy ochre, and just kind of reinforce the shadow back here. Maybe that was a mistake. And no, I don't like that. Some more yellow ochre in there so it's not sticking out so much. I'm going to flip this upside down so I can do these symmetrically, hopefully. think the problem is on this back edge we need to lift these. They don't go all the way back and it's making it look too cartoony, and I think that's what I'm unhappy with. Hello, Cricket. Yeah? It's a very sad sounding meow. I promise it's not dinner time yet. Still 4 o'clock. You eat at 5 o'clock, don't jump on me. I think with the days changing, she's getting confused. What's it like out there? You know, as soon as I get up from this, she's gonna be like, oh, you're getting up because it's dinner time. I'm like, no. It's not how this works. Are we almost done? Looks like a lion. We have just a couple of these darker whiskers, and then the rest are white. Yeah, I like it. So I'm gonna get my ink. Bleedproof white from Dr. P.H. Martin. I'm going to get a smaller brush with a better point on it. We're going to get some of the ink out of the container. Does this count for Inktober? I know it doesn't. It's okay. I will not be able to do regular Inktober stuff this year. I'm hoping to do at least a couple. So I want to completely saturate the brush so it's holding as much as possible, but then kind of twirl. Oh. Aren't we lucky that there's a hairball in progress? Cricket, sweetheart. Okay, I think we're done. Not with the painting. Cricket, I think she's done. Alright, so what I was doing is I was taking this and I was twirling the whole barrel so that as much of the ink got into the brush as possible. That's why I like using the number 2s, because they hold more ink. But these ones are finer and can get better detail. So hopefully this will get some good whiskers for us. Let's go ahead and actually start with the eyes. It's less pressure. Those are just dots. Oh, you know what's the problem? This is my brush that has a problem. The end is frayed. So that's why I couldn't get a good point on it. Let's try using this one then. This is a size 2, but it has a point on it that isn't bent yet. Because it's a size 2, it's going to hold more ink, so we'll go ahead and get some more mixed up. I need it to be a spreadable consistency that won't skip over the paper, but that's dark enough or opaque enough to cover. We're going to go ahead and drop our highlights in. These are not in the reference picture, but you guys know me and my eye highlights. Gotta do it. Okay, then we're gonna turn the paper so that our hand can pull in comfortable direction. And I actually think I want to add in just a teeny tiny bit of yellow ochre to make this more cream colored instead of white. It'll help with the starkness. So just slightly off white there. Our whisker should come from one of the little I don't know what those are called. The whisker dots. I'm using the lightest hand I can. That one was still too thick. We're just going to do a few. We don't want too many. I think I want one more in this area here. Then we'll move to the other side. This is always hard because the angles aren't the same, and I usually end up doing the whiskers like tilted one direction or the other, which I always hate. So I'm going to try and do a couple, and then I will check to make sure we're in the right direction. Yay! I didn't totally butcher the whiskers. They're not perfect, but whiskers aren't perfect, so that's alright. Use the same color to do just a couple lines down here. My ink is getting a little dry, so I'm just going to add a little bit more water. Make sure my brush isn't too wet going back in. I rarely try and fix white areas of the paper like this, but that's really gonna bother me if I don't. So I'm just gonna put in a little bit of the cream color there, followed by a little bit of the white. Ooh, too much white, too much white. A water droplet fell down my brush. That was a cute little purr. She like rolled over and purred at the same time. I'm real worried about adding too much white. Like I don't want it to take away from the whiskers or the eyes. But I could certainly see a case made for putting some in here. I'll try a couple, see what it looks like. Just to try and pick up the highlights of the fur here. I don't think we need it. We'll go ahead and put some up around the fur by the ears though. I'm going to get a little more yellow ochre in here. You did the silly little purr again, kitten. See, here I feel like the definition helps. Here is kind of more of a backdrop for the face, so I don't think it's as necessary. You certainly could. I just don't want to overdo it. Alright guys, we are coming to the end. I'm sorry it took me so long to get this to you, but I hope it was worth the wait. I'm pretty happy with it. pretty darn happy with it. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to do. I'm gonna take just a teeny tiny bit. I wonder if I could zoom you in even more for this. Just gonna drop in a tiny little highlight under the eye, or at the bottom of the iris rather. And if you get over your black a little bit, you can just grab a little bit more. Make sure there's no water on your ferrule. And clean it back up. There we go, guys. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that. Again, this is going to be, I guess not every single one of you, but a lot of you guys who are at the $15, $25, $50 tiers. This will be included with your postcard and or your pack this week, this month. We have our 8x10s going out in October for one of our quarterly packages. And then for everyone else, if you'd like to increase your pledge to the 15, you can get this as well, oh my gosh, my words, as well as whatever our postcard ends up being, which is going to be original patron artwork this time around, so it hasn't been created yet. We'll take one of the tutorials that we've done, and I hope that I will see you guys around. Have a great start to your month. And I'll see you in the next video.